I've been in the consulting space now for about 25 years, and for the most part, I've enjoyed my career, but there was a time in my career where I almost quit. That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of their digital transformation journeys. And I started my career in the late 90s at one of the big system integrator, big four consulting firms. And I started as a change management consultant. I was a digital transformation change management consultant. And there's a lot I learned in that early formative time of my career that caused me to really enjoy consulting, and to this day I still do enjoy consulting. But there were also times in my career where I really questioned whether or not I should be a consultant. And there was a couple times where I thought about quitting this field, which is strange because this is all I know and all I've ever known, but it is something that I considered. And so what I want to do today is talk about what some of those reasons are, why I almost quit, and more importantly, provide some advice and feedback and career mentoring to those of you that are either in consulting or maybe thinking about getting into consulting as well. One of the reasons why I almost quit my career in consulting is because of the bias that most consulting firms have, including consulting firms that I worked for earlier in my career. And what I mean by bias is not questioning whether or not consultants are smart or whether or not I felt like I knew what I was doing as a consultant, but instead having a preconceived, predefined answer that we would go into to provide clients. And this was something that frustrated me early in my career, and it's also something that I found to be very common in the consulting industry. Most consulting firms are aligned with certain technology vendors, and as a result, they recommend certain technology vendors and technology solutions because either they get commission for selling that software and or they have a bench of resources that specialize in that type of software, so therefore they have an economic incentive to recommend that product. So that bias is something that really troubled me early in my career. And one of the early consulting projects that I was involved with is one that entailed a software selection. And we went in and evaluated the company's operations, their current state, define the future state, and ultimately our job was to recommend a certain solution. And I remember finding out in the first week of that consulting engagement that we were going to recommend SAP. And being a young, naive consultant, I didn't understand why. I came in with wide eyes, assuming that we'd go in, we'd analyze the situation, we'd go look at different technologies, and we'd make the recommendation that made the most sense for the client. But what I learned pretty quickly was that we were always going to recommend SAP, and that wasn't really up for debate. What was up for debate is how we were going to make the case for this particular enterprise technology. So that bias is something that I learned at a very young age, early in my career, something that really bothered me. And ultimately, it was the reason why I started Third Stage Consulting, to provide that technology agnostic advice to clients and make sure that we weren't being biased in providing that sort of input. And by starting a company that's focused on that technology agnostic view, that was what ultimately prevented me from quitting the field of consulting. The other reason why I almost quit the field of consulting is because oftentimes consulting firms have competing priorities that conflict with that of their clients. I already talked about the technological bias, the relationships with technology vendors that oftentimes fuel a sort of bias in the recommendations that are made to a client. But in addition to that, there's other competing and conflicting priorities. The biggest one being that when you work for especially a large consulting firm with tens or hundreds of thousands of employees, the sole focus becomes how do we keep armies of consultants engaged on big projects? And oftentimes that entails putting consultants on projects that don't really need to be there, or they're not qualified, there's not the budget for those additional resources, but by placing those resources on the project, they're getting more money. And especially with these big firms, they need to have dozens of people on a project to make it worth their time. And oftentimes organizations don't ask the question, why do you have dozens of consultants on this project? So that sort of conflict between self-interest of the consulting firms and the needs and interests of the clients, and that conflict that came with that is another reason why I almost quit the consulting field. So one thing I'd encourage you to do if you are working, especially for a larger system integrator, is be sure that you're very deliberate about adding value and be sure that you work for an organization that reflects your values and the cultural nuances that you're looking for in your career. The next challenge I had with the consulting career that I'm in is the inflexibility, the sort of one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter approach to consulting. And this is a tricky one because on one hand, organizations hire consultants because they have a repeatable process and a methodology and tool set that can speed things up and make things go faster than if they were to try to do it themselves. And it's also a great way to train and groom new consultants on how to perform certain types of consulting. But on the other hand, there is no one-size-fits-all to complex decisions and complex initiatives like digital transformations, and you need to be pretty flexible and introduce that art to augment the science of repeatable business processes. And what I found is that most organizations in the consulting field are not good at that. They're not good at being flexible, but also being standardized and having common business processes and tool sets to help in the consulting engagements. So when you're thinking about what sort of consulting firm you want to work for, it's important to recognize that weakness or that limitation for many consulting organizations and find the type of consulting organization that best reflects the type of work you want to do. Whether you want to be part of a big cookie cutter machine, AKA one of the big 4 consulting firms, or if you want to have more creativity and more flexibility in the types of consulting that you do, which might lead you to gravitate to more of a small or niche focused consulting firm. The other thing that drives me crazy about the consulting field is the lack of business value that is too often demonstrated or not demonstrated for their clients. And I talked about some of the bias and some of the competing priorities that can undermine business value. But in addition to that, you see a lot of big consulting firms that get so focused on deliverables and perfecting PowerPoint templates and perfecting PowerPoint deliverables that don't add any immediate business value, or at the very least, at the very best, you're getting diminishing returns on those deliverables. So when you think about the type of consulting firm you work for, you want to think about, do you want to work for a firm that perfects really good-looking deliverables and polished PowerPoint deliverables, or do you want to work for one that maybe does that, but also, more importantly, delivers actual business value that can actually help clients through their strategic initiatives and help them execute on their strategic initiatives? And this requires a lot more than just creating nice, fancy PowerPoints. It requires a great deal of knowledge and finesse to be able to do so. So business value is something you really want to focus on when choosing the right type of consulting organization that you want to hang your career on. Now, ultimately, I decided not to quit the consulting field. 25 years later, I'm still here. And I already mentioned that one of the reasons why I chose not to quit is because I charted my own course and my own path by creating a consulting firm that better reflected my values and the way I viewed consulting. But as far as you, what should you do? How do you find that right consulting firm? And how do you know if consulting is the right field for you? Well, first of all, there's a number of other videos I've included on my YouTube channel that are about consulting careers, whether or not it's the right field for you, things that might prevent you from becoming a consultant, or things that you might consider as sort of the dark side of consulting. So I encourage you to check out some of the videos on my YouTube channel that go deeper into this question. But the way I would summarize it is to say, really look inwardly at yourself and what your values are, what you want to accomplish in your career, and make sure that if you do go into consulting, first of all, you are sure that you want to go into consulting and that it's the right career for you. But more importantly, if you do decide to go into consulting, make sure you choose the right kind of firm. Make sure it's the right type of organization in terms of size and scope and scale, what they do, what they believe in, what the values are, the culture. All that stuff is arguably more important than the brand name recognition or what you might see on the surface in advertising campaigns and other sorts of sales and marketing collateral that you might see from these. So I hope this has provided some insight as to some things to think about as you consider a career in consulting. I encourage you, if you're interested in a firm like Third Stage Consulting, a technology agnostic firm that's not massive, but it's not tiny, but it is flexible, it provides a lot of career growth and opportunity, I encourage you to reach out to us and submit your CV or resume to us. We're always looking for people throughout the world in our various international offices. I've included below an email address that you can submit your resume, and you can also see that at the bottom of your screen here. So be sure to reach out if you're interested in submitting your resume for a company like Third Stage. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. And actually, I recall one of the first projects I was ever involved in, how to keep as many people on the, so let me start that over, that SAP was the recommended answer. And being a young, naive consultant that was just starting out.
She's in the shop.
Oh, she?
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you laughing? I was young, naive. It was a hard time for me. Can actually help clients through their strategic, strategery.